There is a part of every man he will never show you. Not because he does not want to, but because he cannot. It hides behind the mask of confidence, the smirk of indifference, the silence after an argument. You think you are seeing his distance, but what you are really seeing is his fear. Freud once called it the unconscious battlefield, the place where desire, guilt, and pride fight in secret. And men, more than anyone else, are prisoners of that inner war. Here's the truth. Men crave love, but they fear the loss of power even more. And every romantic gesture, every act of withdrawal, every unexplained coldness is the echo of that fear. This is the hidden psychology of men. The part they'll never admit to women, because even they barely understand it themselves. Sigmund Freud, the man who dared to dissect the soul. He believed every human desire hides a deeper truth, and every attraction carries the ghost of an ancient wound. To Freud, a man's love is not pure affection. It is a transaction between his longing and his ego. He doesn't just want to be loved, he wants to be desired for his strength. That is why a man can adore a woman, and still pull away when she gets too close. He wants her admiration, but fears her insight, because once she sees through him, once she understands him, he loses the illusion of control that keeps his ego alive. Freud called this the narcissism of small differences, the need to feel slightly above the one you love. For men, this is not arrogance, it is survival. They are raised to believe that power equals worth. So when love threatens to equalize that power, the boy inside him, the one who never felt enough, begins to panic. And that panic hides behind silence, jokes, or emotional distance. Watch closely when a man falls in love. At first he's fearless. He pursues, he plans, he dreams, but the moment he feels emotionally outmatched, he begins to protect himself from the very thing he wanted. Freud would say this is the conflict between the id and the ego. The id wants pleasure, connection, intimacy, the raw truth. The ego, however, wants to remain in control. It wants to love without surrendering. That's why he'll tell you he needs space, why he'll ghost you after a deep night of vulnerability, why he'll retreat into silence when things become too real. Because to a man, being loved is not always a reward, it's exposure. Love shows him what he lacks, what he fears, and what he cannot articulate. And most men cannot face that mirror for long. The hidden psychology of men is not about deception, it's about protection. He hides not to manipulate you, but to survive the feeling of being powerless in front of your emotional truth. Think about it. How many times have you seen a man change when he feels replaced? Suddenly he texts more. Suddenly he cares again. He doesn't miss you. He misses the reflection of strength he felt when you wanted him. Because in his mind, love is not a shared experience. It's a measurement of power. And the moment a woman no longer needs him, he feels something deeper than rejection. He feels extinction. Freud believed the male psyche is built around two opposing instincts. Eros, the drive to connect, to love, to merge with another soul. And Thanatos, the drive to dominate, to preserve the self, to never be consumed. In love, both instincts collide. He wants her closeness, but fears the death of his independence. That is why many men love better in fantasy than in reality. They romanticize the woman who is just out of reach, because distance allows them to love without losing control. It's the same reason some men sabotage the relationships they claim to value. Subconsciously, they believe that love will demand too much. Their vulnerability, their softness, their submission. Freud once wrote, "He does not want to be loved as he is, but as he imagines himself to be." That's the tragedy. Men do not fall in love with the woman before them. They fall in love with how she makes them feel about themselves. And when that reflection begins to fade, when the woman starts seeing the cracks, he withdraws. He calls her too much and too emotional, too complicated. But those words are defense mechanisms. They protect his illusion of being the stable one, the one in control. Yet behind that calm exterior is the terror of exposure, the dread that if she truly sees him, his insecurities, his failures, his emotional confusion, she will lose respect for him. And respect, to most men, means more than love itself, because a man's love depends on one question: do I still feel strong in her eyes? Here's the danger. When a woman mistakes his withdrawal for indifference, she starts chasing validation that was never hers to earn. She over-explains. She over-apologizes. She becomes smaller, thinking it will bring him closer, but the more she chases, the more he retreats, because the balance of power has shifted, and his ego feeds on that imbalance to feel alive again. Freud warned about this cycle, a repetition compulsion, where we recreate familiar pain to avoid unfamiliar truth. The man repeats emotional distance because it feels safer than intimacy. The woman repeats self-sacrifice because it feels safer than abandonment. This is the unconscious love story of our time. The modern man, torn between dominance and devotion. The modern woman, torn between understanding and exhaustion. And the cost of not seeing the truth is heartbreak disguised as destiny. You've felt it. The moment he turns cold after you give more. The confusion of feeling invisible in the relationship you built. The quiet fear that maybe love is not meant to feel safe. But here's the truth Freud never said out loud. Men do not run from love. They run from the parts of themselves that love exposes. When he distances himself, he's not escaping you. He's escaping the reflection of his own vulnerability that your presence awakens. And until he faces that, no amount of your patience, warmth, or logic can reach him. That's the hidden psychology of men. They are not heartless. They are haunted. So what happens when a woman finally understands this? When she sees the pattern not as rejection, but as revelation, she stops begging for love to feel safe. She begins to observe instead of react. She starts to understand that his silence is not a punishment. It's a confession. She realizes that she can love him without losing herself. Because love without self-respect becomes worship, and worship always leads to resentment. Freud once said that love is a state of temporary psychosis, but the woman who sees clearly is immune to it. She can look at his fear, his control, his confusion, and see it for what it is. The residue of boyhood. She no longer tries to fix him. She lets his ego collapse on its own, because she knows that a man who fears being seen cannot truly love. And when she stops chasing what hides, she starts attracting what stands firm. Here's the shift. The woman who understands the hidden psychology of men no longer asks, "Why does he not love me?" She asks, "Why am I giving love to someone who fears it?" That awareness is power. It turns pain into perception. It turns confusion into clarity, and it sets her free, not from men but from the illusion that she must earn what should flow naturally. Because the truth is, the woman who understands this never chases. She chooses. She chooses silence over begging, dignity over explanation, depth over drama, and in doing so she becomes the mirror he cannot escape. Not the reflection of his power, but the reminder of what true strength looks like. Emotional intelligence, compassion without self-erasure, and love that does not beg to be returned. That is the end of the illusion. That is the beginning of understanding. As Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Now you see the pattern for what it is. Not fate, not mystery, but psychology. And the woman who learns this truth no longer seeks to be chosen. She becomes the one who chooses.